Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4. We are going to be reading from chapter 28 today, Puranjana, reborn as a woman. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamam vande Shri Gurum Dina Tarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Puranjan leaves his body and takes birth as a pious princess. Narad saw the weariness on Prachina Barhi's face. He was still a handsome and powerful man, but the onset of old age was showing. The wrinkles and thinning hair. It was time he gave up his futile pursuit of sensual pleasure and became serious about spiritual life. Verses 1 to 4, Narad said, "My dear king, accompanied by Prajvara, Kalakanya and his soldiers, Bhai travelled all over the world. One day they forcefully attacked Puranjan city, which was filled with all enjoyable items and protected by the old serpent. Jara and the host of fearful soldiers streamed in through its gates, causing havoc everywhere. Jara and Bhaya personally cornered and tormented Puranjan, who fully identified with his city and was absorbed in family affection." Verses 6 to 11, when Jara seized him in her embrace, his beauty faded. Due to his addiction to sex, his intelligence was clouded, his city was smashed by the Gandharvas and Yavanas, and he lost everything. The anguished king saw that his sons, grandsons, and ministers were abandoning him. Even his wife became indifferent and disrespectful. Weakened by Jara's embrace, he could do nothing. His lust for enjoyment had hardly diminished, but his ability to enjoy was finished. Everything became stale and tasteless. Ignorant of life's aim, he continued to fret about his wife and children. Although he wanted to remain in his once proud and delightful city, he was forced to leave. Desiring to please his brother Bhaya, Prajvara set the city on fire. Verses 12 to 14, caught in that conflagration with all his family members, servants and citizens, Puranjan was stricken with sorrow. When the city's protector, the serpent, saw he was helpless to defend the city from the blazing heat brought on by Prajvara, he decided to flee, just as a snake flees the hollow of a burning tree. Completely debilitated by the attacking soldiers, the serpent tried to leave but was checked by his enemies. He cried out in distress. Prachin Barhi's face paled. This would soon be his fate. When death approaches, one's throat chokes with mucus and air. The life airs try to escape, creating a rattling sound. He had seen it many times. Verses 16 to 21, Narad said, confronted with death, Puranjan thought only of his family members, home, wealth and possessions. He could not forego the belief that he was his city, that everyone and everything in it belonged to him. Memories of happier times with his wife overwhelmed him and his eyes flooded with tears. As he was dragged away, he was overcome with anxiety for his family. His wife was encumbered with so many children. When he passed from his body, how would she maintain them? The distraught Puranjan recalled how his wife had served him, neither eating nor bathing before him. Deeply attached to him, she would silently tolerate his angry chastisements. He remembered how she would give him good counsel when he was distressed and grieve when he was away. Although she was the mother of many heroic sons, he worried how she would cope in his absence. Puranjan trembled with apprehension. His children depended upon him. What would happen to them when he was gone? They would be exactly like passengers aboard a sinking ship. Verses 22 to 24. Forgetting his real identity as a fragmental spiritual part of Krishna, he lamented the fate of his wife and children. In the meantime, Bhaya drew near and seized him. The king's grieving followers lamented as Bhaya bound him like an animal and dragged him away, forcing them all to follow behind. The city's guardian's serpent had already been arrested and was waiting bound up outside the city. He was forced to follow as Puranjan was hauled away. Once the city was abandoned, it was dismantled and smashed to dust. Verses 25 to 26. Throughout his ordeal, Puranjan did not remember his friend and well-wisher Avijnata, the super soul. He saw the many animals he had mercilessly killed in various sacrifices. They lined his path and pierced him repeatedly with iron-like horns. He felt as if he were being hacked apart with axes. Narad paused for a moment and observed the ashen-faced Prachin Barahi. The king sat with his hands clasped, his brow knit in concentration. Verses 27 to 29, Narad continued, Men like Puranjan who always think of sex suffer continuously in the material existence, forgetful of their spiritual identity, since he had been absorbed in thoughts of his wife. At the time of his death, in his next life, he took birth as Vaidarbhi, the beautiful daughter of King Vidarbha. In due course, she married the powerful king Malyadhwaj of Pandya province, who accepted her hand after conquering other princes. Please explain the significance of Malyadhwaj's name and also that of province he ruled. The name Malyadhwaj signifies a great devotee who stands as firm as Malya hill and through his preaching makes other devotees similarly fixed. The word Pandya comes from the word Panda, meaning knowledge. Unless one is highly learned, he cannot conquer materialistic conceptions. Prachin Barhi thanked Narad, who continued to speak. Verses 30 to 31. In Vaidarbhi's womb, King Malyadhwaj fathered one black-eyed daughter and 7 sons, who became rulers of the Dravid country. They fathered millions of sons of their own who have been protecting the earth throughout Manu's lifespan and beyond. Prachin Barhi asked, Please explain who the daughters, sons and other descendants of Malyadhwaj represent. Narad replied, his daughter is described as black-eyed because her eyes were always on Krishna. She represents a person fixed in serving Krishna. The 7 sons represent 7 processes of devotional service to him: hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, praying, offering obeisance, and serving his lotus feet. The king's many other descendants are the devotees who, to protect the innocent people, continue to propagate the teachings of Krishna consciousness through an unbroken line of teachers. Prachin Barhi said, I remember once hearing there are 9 processes of devotional service to Krishna. Why do you only refer to 7? A very good question, dear king. There are indeed 9 processes. The 7 I just mentioned are the beginning of bhakti, which neophyte devotees must perform. The last 2 processes, friendship and full surrender, come later when one has reached the stage of spontaneous devotional service. Generally, only the empowered, self-realized teachers can practice them. Why do you say generally, great sage? Can neophytes sometimes practice them also? No, one must actually be advanced, but sometimes such elevated souls do not reveal themselves as teachers. Prachin Bari asked if there was any significance to the word Dravid. Narad said, in South India there are 5 provinces known as the 5 Dravidas, which are famous for Krishna Bhakti. In the future, many great preachers will be born in these regions. Prachin Bari thanked Narad and the sage continued his narration. Verse 32, Malyadhwaja and Vaidarbhi's daughter married sage Agastya. This couple had a son named Drid Achyuta, whose son was Idhamvaha. Sage Agastya, said the king in surprise, he is a real person. I thought this was an allegory. I am not referring to him. Here, Agastya represents the mind, and as I previously said, Vedarbi's daughter represents steady devotional service. When the mind is absorbed in bhakti, one is fixed in his spiritual position with a determined vow, Dridhachitta, and then produces good disciples, idam vaha, who execute strict bhakti. Prachin Barhi ran his hand through his hair. It was hard to take everything in, but he was getting the idea. Verses 33 to 39, Narad said, the saintly Maladhvaj divided his kingdom among his 5 sons. He retired to Kulachala to focus exclusively on devotional service to Krishna. As moonlight follows the moon, his devoted wife renounced her home and family to follow him. In Kulachala were several sacred rivers, Chandravas, Tamraparni and Vatodaka. Maladhvaj would regularly bathe in these to purify himself within and without. He ate frugally from wild produce and underwent severe austerity, gradually becoming emaciated. In time the king rose above duality, becoming equal in heat and cold, happiness and distress, the pleasant and the unpleasant, and impervious to the elements. By worship, austerity, and yoga, he conquered his senses, controlling his breathing and fixed his mind on Krishna. He sat immovable for 100 celestial years and developed pure love for the Lord. Verses 40 to 42, Maladhvaj attained perfect knowledge, perceiving how Krishna is all-pervading as the Supersoul and realizing his own identity as a soul, distinct from the body. In this pure state, Maladhvaj received direct instruction from the Supersoul, enabling him to understand how to engage everything in Krishna's loving service. He realized his eternal loving relationship with Krishna and Krishna's love for him. Seeing himself and the Supersoul seated next to each other, he no longer had any interest separate from Krishna. In this consciousness, the material world became the spiritual world for Maladhvaj. Verses 43 to 44, recognizing her husband's spiritual advancement, his queen accepted him as equal to the Supreme. She also renounced sensual enjoyment and fully engaged in his service. Adopting all the principles he followed, she wore old garments and let her hair become tangled and knotted. Lean and thin due to her austerities, always silent, she remained near her husband, as steady and undisturbed as a flame in a windless space. Verses 45 to 48, for a long time Queen Vaidarbhi served her husband as he sat in yogic trance. One day as she massaged his feet, she noticed they were cold. She realized his soul had departed and became distraught. Like a doe which has lost its mate, widowed and alone in the forest, she lamented and fell weeping to the ground, her tears soaking her breasts. In her grief, she called out to her husband, O best of kings, please rise. In your absence, the world is infested with rogues and robbers and is very much afraid. It is your duty to protect her. Verse 49 to 51, the most obedient wife fell down at her dead husband's feet and cried pitifully. In the solitary forest, she then placed firewood all around his body and set light to it, preparing to hurl herself into the flames. Just at the moment, an elderly Brahmin appeared. He was Puranjan's old friend, who began to pacify her with gentle words. Verse 52, my dear lady, who are you? Whose wife or daughter are you? Who is this man? It seems you are lamenting for his dead body. Vaidarbhi wiped her eyes and looked up at the Brahmin's concerned face. He said, do you not remember me? I am your eternal friend. I may remember that many times in the past you consulted me. Vaidarbhi looked confused. She shook her head and asked, who are you? Verses 53 to 55, I know you cannot recognize me, but can you not remember that you once had a very intimate friend? Unfortunately, you gave up my company and came to the material world to enjoy. Dear gentle friend, you and I are like two swans. We live together in the same heart, which resembles the Manasa lake. Although we have traveled together for thousands of years, We are still far from home. Forgetting me, you have become increasingly materialistic, moving through countless bodies in this world which was created by a woman called Maya. Verses 56 to 58. In the city of the body, you found 5 gardens, 9 gates, 3 apartments, 6 families, 5 stores, 5 material elements, a protector, and a woman who is the lord of the house. The gardens are the 5 sense objects. The protector is the life air, which passes through 9 gates, the 2 eyes, 2 ears, mouth, 2 nostrils, genital and the rectum. The 3 apartments are the chief ingredients, earth, fire and water. The 6 families are the mind and 5 senses, sight, taste, smell, sound and touch. The 5 stores are the working senses. They transact their business through the combined forces of the 5 elements which are eternal. Behind all this activity is the soul, who is a person and factually the master. However, he is now hidden in the city of the body. He is devoid of knowledge of his true self. Verses 59 to 61. Dear friend, when you entered this body along with the woman of material desires, you became overly absorbed in the sense enjoyment and forgot your spiritual nature. Only due to material conceptions do you suffer miserable conditions. In truth, you are not Vidarbha's daughter, nor Maladhwaja's wife, nor indeed were you King Puranjana in your last life. You are simply a soul. Sometimes you think you are a man and sometimes a woman. Spiritual personalities, please try to understand this truth. Verse 62. Since we are both spiritual beings, you and I are not different in quality. You mean we are the same person? Asked Vaidarbhi. The Brahmin shook his head, tried to understand. We are both spirit, the same qualitatively, but not quantitatively. As a spiritual spark, you can be overcome by the illusory energy. I am the all-powerful source of all energies, and I am never deluded by the material creation. Rather, I control Maya. Vaidarbhi said, I am confused. What does it mean that we are one in quality but not quantity? Verse 63. The elderly Brahmin spotted a clay pot of water near where Maladhwaja would sit to meditate. He told Vaidarbhi to look inside it. Staring back at her was her own image reflected in the water. The Brahmin said, Do you see anyone? Yes, replied Vaidarbhi, myself. Is the person in the water pot the same as you in every way? Can the image of you cook or think or speak? No, of course not. So your image is you in one sense but not you in another. It is not as full or great as the original you, but still your image is you. Do you now understand how you and I are one in quality but different in quantity? I think you are the original with all power and I am your limited reflection. The Brahmin smiled. Yes, let me give you another example. He turned to the blazing funeral pyre. Flames leapt up and small sparks flew in all directions. He said, See these flames and sparks. Are they the same? Well, yes, said Vaidarbhi, they are both the same fire. The Brahmin nodded. Then he extinguished a spark fallen on the ground with his foot. Could I have done that to this huge flame? He asked, pointing to the fire. Vaidarbhi shook her head. So the flame and spark are the same because they are both fire, but the spark is small and can be extinguished, unlike the flame. For the same reason, you, the individual spirit soul, and I, the supreme soul, are one in quality, but different in quantity. Is it clear? Verse 64, the queen nodded. The old Brahmin continued, So it is that you and I reside within the heart like 2 pure white swans. When one swan is instructed by the other, he remembers his true identity and regains his original Krishna consciousness. Long lost due to material attraction. Prachin Barhi leaned back. What a wonderful exchange between the Lord and the Queen. He too longed to meet his old friend in the same way. Verse 65, Narad smiled at him. My dear King Prachina Barhi, I have related this allegory about Puranjan because the Lord likes to instruct people indirectly. My purpose is to give you spiritual guidance. Try to understand the deeper meaning of the story, and you will become free of all material attachment and achieve liberation. And with this, we have come to the end of chapter 28, Puranjan, reborn as a woman. Thank you for joining. We'll resume our reading from chapter 29 next time. Hare Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.